My name is Alex Cooper, and I never imagined that a routine fire drill at my office building would change my life forever. I'm a 28-year-old software developer at a tech startup in Boston, leading a relatively quiet life focused on my career. That was until I met him. Ben Miller, the firefighter who would turn my world upside down. It was a crisp autumn morning when our building's fire alarm went off. Unlike the usual drills, this one wasn't scheduled, and there was actual smoke coming from the server room. As we evacuated, I realized I'd left my laptop, containing crucial project code, at my desk. Against better judgment, I slipped back inside. That's when I first encountered Ben. He was coming up the stairs in full firefighting gear just as I was trying to sneak back to my office. "Sir, you need to evacuate immediately." His voice was commanding, even through the mask. When he removed it, I found myself staring into the most intense blue eyes I'd ever seen. "I just need to grab my laptop," I stammered, suddenly feeling foolish about risking my safety for a computer. He grabbed my arm firmly but gently. "That's not happening. Your life is worth more than any computer." There was something in his tone, concern mixed with authority, that made my heart race. As he guided me down the stairs, his hand remained on my back, steady and reassuring. Outside, he insisted on checking me for smoke inhalation, though I assured him I was fine. "I'm Ben," he said, removing his helmet to reveal sandy blonde hair and a face that belonged on a magazine cover. "And you are?" "Alex," I managed to reply, still somewhat breathless, though not from the smoke. "Well, Alex, promise me you won't play hero again." "That's my job." He smiled, and I felt my knees weaken slightly. The fire turned out to be minor. An overheated server that produced more smoke than actual damage. But as I watched Ben and his team pack up their equipment, I couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just happened. A week later, I was working late when someone knocked on our office's glass door. To my surprise, it was Ben, out of uniform but still commanding presence in jeans and a fitted t-shirt. "We're doing follow-up safety inspections," he explained, though something in his expression suggested there might be more to his visit. "Mind if I take a look around?" "Of course not," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I can show you where the server room is." As we walked through the empty office, he asked about my work, seeming genuinely interested in my explanations of software development. When we reached the server room, he spent more time asking about my projects than inspecting the fire safety equipment. "You know," he said finally, "I should probably get your number for safety purposes. Of course, in case there are any more incidents." I felt my face flush as I recited my number, which he saved in his phone. "Safety first," I agreed, trying to sound professional despite my racing heart. "Right, safety," he echoed, holding my gaze a moment longer than necessary. "I'll be in touch, Alex." That night, I could hardly focus on my work. When my phone buzzed an hour later, I nearly dropped it in my haste to check the message. "Dinner tomorrow? I know a great Italian place for safety discussions." "Obviously, Ben." I stared at the screen, a smile spreading across my face. "Obviously, safety is very important," I replied. The next evening, I spent an embarrassing amount of time choosing what to wear before heading to the restaurant. A cozy place in the North End. Ben was already there, looking even more handsome in a blue button-down that matched his eyes. "I was worried you might not come," he admitted as I sat down. "It's not exactly standard procedure to ask out someone you met during an emergency response." "Is that what this is?" I asked, heart pounding. "Asking me out?" He leaned forward slightly. "Well, I could pretend this is a routine safety consultation. But honestly, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since that day." The Italian restaurant became our sanctuary. That evening, over plates of handmade pasta and glasses of Chianti, Ben told me about his journey to becoming a firefighter. He came from a military family, his father and older brother both served in the Marines. But he had chosen a different path of service. "I wanted to help people, but I also wanted to stay close to home," he explained, his eyes lighting up as he talked about his work. "There's something about being able to make a difference in your own community." I found myself captivated by his passion. The way his hands moved as he described different rescue scenarios. The genuine care in his voice when he talked about the people he'd helped. He was nothing like the stereotype of the tough, emotionally distant firefighter I might have expected. "What about you?" he asked, genuinely interested. How did you end up in software development? I told him about my childhood fascination with computers. About building my first program at 12. About the thrill of solving complex problems through code. He listened intently, asking intelligent questions that showed he was truly engaged. You know, he said with a smile, I love how your eyes light up when you talk about coding. It's the same way I probably look when talking about firefighting. The evening flew by, and before we knew it, the restaurant was preparing to close. Neither of us wanted the night to end, so we decided to take a walk along the waterfront. The October air was crisp, and Ben noticed me shivering. Without hesitation, he shrugged off his jacket and draped it over my shoulders. The gesture was so natural, so caring, that it made my heart skip a beat. His jacket smelled like him, a mix of cologne and something uniquely Ben. Better? He asked softly, his hand lingering on my shoulder. Much, I replied, looking up at him in the moonlight. His blue eyes seemed even more intense. We stopped at a quiet spot overlooking the harbor, the city lights reflecting off the water. Ben turned to face me, and I could feel the atmosphere shift. Alex, he said, his voice lower than before. I know this might seem fast, but I feel like I've known you longer than just a few days. I know what you mean, I admitted. It's strange, isn't it, how sometimes you just connect with someone. He stepped closer, his hand coming up to cup my cheek. Is this okay? He whispered. I nodded, unable to form words, when his lips met mine. It was gentle at first, almost questioning, but as I responded, pulling him closer by his shirt, the kiss deepened, his arms wrapped around me, strong and protective, and I felt like I was finally where I belonged. When we finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, he rested his forehead against mine. I've been wanting to do that since I first saw you in that stairwell. He confessed, even with the smoke and my terrible decision-making. I laughed, especially then. You were cute when you were trying to explain why you needed that laptop. We exchanged several more kisses before the cold finally forced us to call it a night. Ben insisted on driving me home, and as we pulled up to my apartment building, he turned to me with a serious expression. I want to see you again, he said. Actually, I want to see a lot more of you. But I need you to know something. He paused, taking a deep breath. My job, it can be complicated. The hours are unpredictable, and there's always risk involved. Some people find that hard to handle. I reached over and took his hand. Ben, I understand, and I want to see where this goes. Unpredictable hours and all. His smile could have lit up the entire street. He walked me to my door, where we shared one more lingering kiss before saying goodnight. As I watched him drive away, I couldn't help but think that my life had just changed in the most unexpected and wonderful way. The next morning, I woke up to a text from him. Last night was amazing. Dinner at my place tomorrow? I make a mean grilled salmon. I smiled at my phone, already looking forward to seeing him again. But as I got ready for work, a small worry nagged at me. How would this relationship work with our very different careers and schedules? And more importantly, how would his colleagues in the traditionally masculine environment of the fire department react to him dating a man? The dinner at Ben's place turned out to be the first of many intimate evenings together. His apartment was exactly what I'd expected, neat and organized, with a mix of modern furniture and firefighting memorabilia. Photos of his crew lined one wall, and I found myself studying their faces, wondering how they'd react to us. Ben proved to be an excellent cook, and as we sat at his kitchen island eating grilled salmon, lemon, and roasted vegetables, he told me more about his life at the firehouse. They're like family, he said. Speaking of his crew, we spend 24-hour shifts together, share meals, face dangerous situations, that kind of bond. It's special. He paused, pushing food around his plate. But there's still a lot they don't know about me. I reached across the counter and took his hand. Are you out at work? He shook his head. A few people know. My captain, Dave, he figured it out a while ago. He's been supportive, but, he squeezed my hand. The fire service is changing, but it's still a very traditional environment. No pressure, I assured him. We can take this at whatever pace feels right. His response was to pull me around the island and kiss me deeply. How did I get so lucky? He murmured against my lips. That night was the first time we made love. Ben was as tender and passionate in bed as he was in everything else. His strong hands gentle as they explored my body. Afterward, lying in his arms, I felt a level of contentment I'd never experienced before. The next few weeks fell into a pattern. Ben would come to my office when his shift ended, or I'd bring dinner to the firehouse. Careful to maintain the appearance of just being friends, we spent our free evenings together cooking, watching movies, or simply talking for hours. One morning, about 2 months into our relationship, I was at my desk when my phone buzzed with a news alert. Major fire at downtown hotel. Multiple casualties reported. My heart stopped when I recognized the location. It was in Ben's district. For the next few hours, I couldn't focus on anything. I kept refreshing news sites, watching live coverage, scanning the background of every shot for a glimpse of Ben. Finally, my phone lit up with his name. "I'm okay," he said before I could speak, his voice hoarse from smoke. "It was rough, but we got everyone out. I'm sorry I couldn't call sooner." "Can I see you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Come to the firehouse. My shift ends in an hour." When I arrived, Ben was still in his gear, soot staining his face. The moment he saw me, he pulled me into a tight hug, not caring who might see. I could feel him trembling slightly, the adrenaline from the fire still coursing through his system. "We lost 2 of our guys today," he whispered. "Not from my house, but it could have been. It could have been any of us." I held him tighter, understanding for the first time the real weight of his profession. As we stood there, I heard footsteps approaching. Ben tensed but didn't let go. "Miller," a voice called. We separated to find his captain Dave watching us with concerned eyes. "Everything okay?" Ben straightened up, keeping one hand on my back. "Cap, this is Alex, my boyfriend." The word sent a thrill through me. It was the first time he'd used that term. Dave's expression softened. "About time you introduced him properly," he said, extending his hand to me. "Ben's been walking around with a goofy smile for months now. Nice to finally meet the reason why." The tension drained from Ben's shoulders. "You knew? Kid, I've known you for 5 years. I've never seen you this happy." Dave's radio crackled, and he turned to leave. "Take him home, Miller. You've had a rough day." At Ben's apartment, after he'd showered and changed, we lay tangled together on his couch. "I'm sorry if I put you on the spot earlier," he said with Dave. I silenced him with a kiss. "Never apologize for claiming me as yours." He traced my jawline with his fingers. "I love you," he said suddenly. "I know it might be too soon, but today made me realize life's too short to wait to say important things." Tears pricked at my eyes. "I love you too," I whispered back. That night marked a turning point in our relationship. Ben gradually began being more open about us at work. While some of his colleagues were initially surprised, most were supportive. Those who weren't kept their opinions to themselves, respecting Ben's reputation as one of their best firefighters. As spring approached, our relationship grew stronger. Ben had practically moved into my apartment, though he kept his place as a backup for when he needed to be closer to the firehouse. Our lives had merged seamlessly, my tech world colliding with his world of emergency services in unexpected ways. One evening, while watching Ben cook dinner, he'd insisted on taking over my kitchen, claiming my cooking skills were a fire hazard. I brought up an idea that had been forming in my mind. "I've been thinking about developing an app," I said, watching his reaction, "something to help firefighters track their exposure to harmful substances during calls. Like a digital health diary." Ben turned from the stove. His interest peaked. "That could be incredibly useful. We try to keep records, but in the heat of the moment, it's not always practical. Would you help me design it? I know the coding part, but I need someone who understands the practical aspects." His face lit up. "I'd love to. Actually, this could be huge for the department. Let me talk to Cap about it." The project became our shared passion. We'd spend evenings at my dining table, Ben describing scenarios and needs while I sketched out interfaces and wrote code. It brought us closer, giving us a deeper understanding of each other's worlds. One night, as we were working on the app, Ben's phone rang. His expression turned serious as he answered it. "Miller here." "Yes, sir, I understand. I'll be there in 20. "What's wrong?" I asked as he started gathering his gear. "Major warehouse fire in South Boston. They're calling in extra units." He pulled on his boots quickly. "Could be a long night." I helped him collect his things, trying to ignore the knot of worry in my stomach that formed every time he got called to a serious fire. As he headed for the door, he turned back and kissed me deeply. "I love you," he said, Don't wait up. But of course, I did wait up. I couldn't sleep when he was out on dangerous calls. Instead, I worked on the app, channeling my anxiety into productivity. Around 3 a.m., I heard his key in the lock. He looked exhausted, his face streaked with soot despite his protective gear. Without a word, he walked straight into my arms. Rough one? I asked softly. He nodded against my shoulder. Lost the building, but everyone got out. He pulled back slightly, looking into my eyes. Being a firefighter's partner isn't easy. Is it? Being away from you isn't easy. I admitted, but knowing you're out there helping people, saving lives, it makes me proud to be yours. He smiled tiredly. Move in with me. Officially. I mean, let's find a new place together. Somewhere between your office and the firehouse. The question caught me off guard. But my answer was immediate. Yes. Absolutely yes. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of apartment hunting, furniture shopping, and merging our lives even further. We found a beautiful 2-bedroom apartment in Back Bay with enough space for both my home office and Ben's firefighting gear. Moving day brought both our worlds together. Ben's crew showed up to help, their strength making quick work of heavy furniture. My tech colleagues came too, more adept at setting up our electronics but equally willing to pitch in with the heavy lifting. Watching them all work together, joking and getting to know each other, filled me with joy. This was our family now. A unique blend of firefighters and software developers brought together by our love. That evening, after everyone had left and we were surrounded by boxes, Ben pulled me onto our new couch, the one piece of furniture we'd bought together. What are you thinking? He asked, noticing my contemplative expression. Just about how far we've come since that fire drill, I said, snuggling into his side. Did you ever imagine this would happen when you caught me trying to save my laptop? He laughed, the sound rumbling in his chest. Actually, I went back to the firehouse that day and told Dave I'd met someone special. He thought I was crazy. Said I was letting a pretty face cloud my judgment about fire safety protocols. Pretty face, huh? I teased. Very pretty, he confirmed, kissing my forehead, but it was your heart that made me fall in love with you. The launch of our firefighter safety app became a turning point, not just for our relationship but for the entire department. What started as a personal project grew into something much bigger. The Boston Fire Department officially adopted it for testing, and soon other departments across Massachusetts showed interest. Ben and I were invited to present the app at a regional firefighters conference. Standing on stage together, watching him demonstrate the features we developed, I felt an overwhelming sense of pride. Here was the man I loved, bridging the gap between his world and mine, helping to make his dangerous profession a little safer. After the presentation, during the reception, I overheard 2 older firefighters talking. Miller's really made something of himself. One said, never thought I'd see one of our own working with tech guys. But he and that partner of his have created something special. Partner? The other questioned. Yeah, they're together. Got a problem with that? Nah, times are changing. Besides, anyone who helps keep our people safer is family in my book. Ben appeared beside me, slipping his hand into mine. Eavesdropping? He whispered, amused. Just enjoying how far we've come, I replied. That night back at our apartment, Ben was unusually quiet as we got ready for bed. He kept touching the pocket of his jeans before changing into pajamas, as if checking for something. Everything okay? I asked, concerned by his nervous energy. More than okay, he said, taking a deep breath. Actually, I've been thinking. He reached into his discarded jeans and pulled out a small box. My heart stopped. Alex Cooper, he began, dropping to one knee beside our bed. You changed my life that day in the stairwell. You've supported me through every difficult call, celebrated every victory, and created something amazing that will help protect me and my brothers and sisters in the service. You've shown me that being true to myself didn't make me any less of a firefighter. It made me a better one. You've given me the courage to be who I am, to love openly and proudly. I promise to protect and cherish you always, to face whatever fires life brings us together, and to never take for granted the miracle of finding you. He opened the box, revealing 2 matching platinum bands. Will you marry me? Tears were streaming down my face as I pulled him up into a kiss. Yes, I whispered against his lips. 1,000 times yes. The next day, Ben wore his ring to work for the first time. The reaction at the firehouse was overwhelming. in the best way possible. The crew organized an impromptu celebration, complete with the station's famous chili and enough beer to float a boat. "About time," Dave exclaimed, clapping Ben on the back. "When's the wedding?" We set the date for the following spring, deciding to have the ceremony in the garden of a historic firehouse that had been converted into an event space. It seemed fitting to blend the traditional with the modern. Just like our relationship, planning the wedding brought new challenges. My parents, though supportive, were still adjusting to having a firefighter for a son-in-law. Ben's mother was enthusiastic, but his father, a retired fire captain, was more reserved. "He'll come around," Ben assured me one night after a tense family dinner. "He's already warmed up to you more than he lets on. I caught him showing your app to his old crew members last week." The winter passed in a blur of wedding preparations and work. Our app was gaining national attention, and I'd taken a leave from my regular job to focus on developing it further. Ben had been promoted to lieutenant, which meant more responsibility but also more regular hours. One snowy evening, about 2 months before the wedding, Ben's father showed up at our door unexpectedly. Ben was on shift, so I invited him in with some trepidation. "Alex," he said, settling onto our couch, "I owe you an apology." I sat across from him, surprised. "Sir?" "When Ben first told me about you, I was concerned, not because you're a man," he added quickly, "but because I worried you wouldn't understand our life. The demands of the job, the risks, the brotherhood." He leaned forward. "But I was wrong. You haven't just understood it. You've made it better. That app of yours, it's going to save lives." I felt tears pricking at my eyes. "Thank you, sir. That means a lot. Call me John," he said, smiling for the first time. "And I'd be honored to help walk you down the aisle alongside your father at the wedding." When Ben came home the next morning, I told him about his father's visit. He pulled me into a tight embrace, his own eyes glistening. "See," he said softly, "love changes everything." Our wedding day dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect spring day that seems made for new beginnings. The historic firehouse had been transformed with white flowers and twinkling lights, while subtle touches of fire service tradition were woven throughout the decor. I stood in one of the old officer quarters, now converted into a getting-ready room, adjusting my navy blue suit. My father and John, Ben's father, were both there, helping with last-minute preparations. "Nervous?" my father asked, straightening my tie a little. "A little," I admitted, "but in a good way." John placed a hand on my shoulder. "You know, in all my years in the service, I've never seen two people more right for each other. You balance each other perfectly." The ceremony was set to take place in the firehouse garden, where antique fire equipment had been artfully arranged among the flowers. As I walked down the aisle, flanked by both fathers, I caught my first glimpse of Ben. He took my breath away in his dress uniform, medals gleaming on his chest. But it was his smile, bright and full of love, that made my heart skip a beat. His crew stood behind him in their formal uniforms, while my tech team filled the rows on my side, creating a perfect blend of our two worlds. Dave, who had insisted on getting ordained for the occasion, officiated the ceremony. "Love," he began, "is like fire. It needs to be tended carefully, fed regularly, and respected always. But when properly maintained, it provides warmth, light, and energy to everything it touches." I've watched these two men tend their fire with dedication and care, creating something beautiful and lasting. Ben's vows made me cry. "Alex," he said, his voice steady despite the tears in his eyes, "you rushed back into a building once to save your work. And in doing so, you saved me. You showed me that being true to myself didn't make me any less of a firefighter. It made me a better one. You've given me the courage to be who I am, to love openly and proudly. I promise to protect and cherish you always, to face whatever fires life brings us together, and to never take for granted the miracle of finding you." My own vows were equally emotional. "Ben, you came into my life like a hero in a story. But you've shown me that real heroism isn't just about rushing into burning buildings. It's about having the courage to love completely, to be vulnerable, to stand up for what's right. You've taught me that strength comes in many forms, and that the strongest bonds are forged in the hottest fires. I promise to be your partner in all things, to support you through every challenge, and to love you more deeply with each passing day." The reception was held in the main hall of the firehouse, where the original brass pole still gleamed in the center of the room. Ben's crew had insisted on cooking, turning out an impressive spread that rivaled any catering service. During the first dance, Ben held me close as we swayed to "Can't Help Falling in Love." "Happy?" he whispered. "Perfect," I replied, resting my head on his shoulder. The party lasted well into the night, with firefighters and tech geeks mingling seamlessly, sharing stories and laughter. Our app had created unexpected bonds between the two groups, and watching them interact filled me with joy. As the evening wound down, Ben and I slipped away to the garden. The spring air was cool, and he wrapped his dress jacket around my shoulders, just as he had on our first date. "You know," he said, pulling me close, "when I was a rookie, I used to think being a firefighter meant I had to be a certain way, fit a certain mold. Then I met you, and you showed me that being myself, being with you, made me better at everything, including my job. We make a good team," I said, kissing him softly. "The best," he agreed, "and we're just getting started." 1 year later, our app has been adopted by fire departments across the country. Ben was promoted to captain of his own house, where a rainbow flag now flies proudly alongside the department colors. I've started a company developing safety technology for first responders, with Ben as my chief safety advisor. We still face challenges. The nature of Ben's job means I still worry every time he's on a dangerous call. And balancing our careers requires constant communication and compromise. But we face everything together, stronger for the love we share. Sometimes, when I visit Ben at the station, I'll catch him showing new recruits the photo from our wedding day that hangs in his office. "See that?" he'll say. "That's my husband. He's the reason I'm a better firefighter and a better man." And every time I hear those words, I fall in love with him all over again. Our love story might not be conventional, but it's ours. It's a testament to the fact that love knows no boundaries, that courage comes in many forms, and that sometimes the most beautiful things in life emerge from the most unexpected circumstances. As Ben always says, love, like fire, needs respect, dedication, and care. But when you get it right, it lights up your whole world.